Impressive operator. Thanks very much. That really interesting talk, Joel. Oli Madgett is Vice President of Special Projects at FarmLab and has been working with Meat and Livestock Australia, AgriFutures and the Clean Energy Regulator for the past 2 years to scale soil carbon baselining and decarbonise supply chains. Oli has been a great grower in McLaren Vale since 2015 and founded the SA Agritech Meetup, bringing together a community of more than 2,000 developers, farmers and entrepreneurs interested in the agricultural technology space to develop novel solutions in ag tech. Thanks, Oli.
Hi guys, if there's anything here that anybody else has already covered off, I'll kind of move through it, so hopefully I can focus on some interesting areas. I tried to split this up into like 2 parts. So one part of it is going to be around like building on for some of the things you guys have been talking about from a carbon perspective in vineyards, but then I also wanted to talk about some stuff that we've been starting in McLaren Vale, which is somewhat related to it, but it's to do with diversification of our income. Obviously, carbon revenue could be a part of that diversification, but as like a lot of us know, you were mentioning about the price of fat lambs being similar to a ton of grapes. There's definitely in McLaren Vale as well a need for us to start diversifying. I'm sure it's the same in all regions. Just quickly touching on a project that I spoke about a little bit earlier, but over the last year, with the help of Wine Australia and PIRSA, we went, this is actually what got us to go and baseline Treasury's vineyards. So we worked with across 5 vineyards. Our project was to actually fully go through the process of taking those first vineyards, baselining them, writing the land management strategy, actually submitting them in there. There's nothing like actually having to do it to learn. So we worked through that with some great people. Airborne Logic, if you know those guys, you'll see some stuff that they had to do was to create very accurate maps of vineyards. We at FarmLab did a lot of the soil sampling and testing, and that sampling was done by a guy called Joe Siebert, who's the elders guy here now. But he used to be one of our awesome soil samplers, as well as a viticulturist in McLaren Vale. So we did all this. You've seen that picture a few times, but like this is why we had to accurately map vineyards. So what we did, this is a couple of years ago, Louisa, who spoke this morning, she's actually been really instrumental in the way that the soil methods have developed in Australia. They develop every 4 or 5 years, 2018, then there was 2021, which we're under now, under review again. What we did with a whole load of people, we were like, vineyards are different to normal broadacre paddocks or like livestock pasture paddocks, because we have like 2 quite different systems happening here. We've got this under vine area where you're applying like straw mulch, or you're applying compost, you're banding stuff under vine. That's getting lots more water typically than the rest of the area if it's under irrigation. And then between the rows, we obviously have more of a kind of a pasture-based system. So we've got something that looks a bit more like it's like a tree crop, and then something that's pasture-based. So we argued to the Clean Energy Regulator, you need to give us some flexibility when we sample vineyards. So we needed to break the old rules so that we could basically split vineyards. In the method at the moment, it's really important. The most important thing you can do when you're creating a baseline is it's how you basically divide the land that you're putting into the system into the sampling zones. And the more accurately you can create those sampling zones, when they get sampled, those samples actually show that those sampling zones reflect the high, medium and low areas of carbon in the farm you're putting into the system, the more they have confidence in your submission. So, and we, when we're talking about vineyards, was like, actually the most important thing for us to do, we think the most important way that we can give growers the option to split them up is be able to split things up into mid-rows and undervines, and they agreed with us. So we made the change, and you've got that flexibility now. So that's actually something that's usefully happened. This is FarmLab, like I said, environmental data platform. It's About a third of all projects that go into the soil carbon method have used our platform somewhere. So often it's hidden from people and it's just used in the background, but it's end-to-end compliant. So it's compliant in how we create those sampling zones. It's compliant in terms of how we then direct those independent soil samplers out to take samples around the vineyards. They then put those samples into individual bags and they get geotagged. They get geo-referenced when that comes out of the ground, so they're located accurately. And then when those samples get sent to somewhere like APAL labs and come back, those results get sucked into our system, and then the system basically runs all of the calculations. There's like, whatever, 80 equations that exist in this methodology. And one of our poor developers spent about 3 months turning that into code. So you just press a button now and it just comes up with, you've got this much carbon. And then they have a way of checking it, and we're certified compliant again. So basically they'll take the results from us as kind of the truth. It gets accepted. So, and if you don't get that right and you do a soil carbon project and you don't do it properly, it is a genuine world of pain if you don't follow all the rules. This is actually just to show you some real vineyards. So I'll just point out who these people are. This is, there's a lot of numbers here, but I'll split it up for you. This is us in Wollonga. This is, like I said, Hither and Yon, another climate active certified vineyard. I think they're thinking about whether they should stay in climate active as well at the moment. So I think you're not alone. That's a grower called Ben Lacey. So another grower, I think he's one of your eco vineyard growers, great grower. And this is Treasury's 2 vineyards. So this is Barossa, this is Coonawarra. What you'll see, like when I spoke this morning, we were talking about the fact that, so this, the Hither and Yon, who were like one of the first growers in McLaren Vale to kind of adopt all these regenerative practices, if you look at their numbers, at first glance, you're like, they'll look quite similar to the rest of us-ish. You know, they're not those really stark differences that, that can happen. But I just want to point out some things that we see when we look at these numbers. And we've seen, like, I've taken about 20,000 soil samples over the last few years, so we've seen a lot of data. So what this is starting to show us is basically, this is the soil carbon percent that you've got. So this row is the undervine, this is the mid row. You'll see that Hither and Yon, what they did is they were really early on in planting multi-species cover crops. They probably started this 12, 13 years ago. And you'll see that their mid-rows are significant. They're different to all of us, just in the 0 to 30 centimetres. But you'll see the telltale of people actually making progress often happens deeper than 30 centimetres. This is the minimum that needs to get lodged, but wherever you can, you should always sample deeper. We'd always suggest to at least 60 centimetres. And you'll see that they're basically almost double the amount of soil carbon in the 60 centimetres. Again, just a trend for you, just to check the numbers look about right. Often you'll find that your top 30 centimetres will be double what is in the 30 to 60 centimetres. And actually, what's in 0 to 10 centimetres is nearly always double that again. So it was probably about 3%, 0 to 10, when you even it out to 0 to 30, it goes to that, 30 to 60 to that. So again, although Richard was super disappointed when he saw these results, I was like, actually, you're doing super well. We're this high here, so we're really high undervine, because we came into grape growing and we decided to throw loads of money at it, and I was like all excited, spent loads of money on mulch. So we put out like 80 cubes of mulch, and this is like carbon, so we were just pumping carbon, banding it under vine, putting out quite a lot of compost, and this is just probably just the residuals of all of that carbon we've just dumped on the top, and some of it will stick, a lot of it will cycle, but they've made the system a lot healthier. But again, when you take all these numbers and you actually turn them into CO2 equivalent numbers, you'll see again that Hither and Yon we're all pretty much the same type of vineyards, roughly the same type of soils, same type of rainfall. They're actually often about 100 tonnes more CO2 per hectare they're storing than all of the rest of us. So genuinely a significant difference. And again, when you were talking there about Treasury making a choice between which vineyard they put in the system, Barossa generally comes out, it's much more challenging environment for building, for like its soil carbon's typically lower than McLaren Vale and the Coonawarra, which is why they went down there. Just the usual stuff that those growers have been doing. Again, just to highlight some more interesting things I wanted to show you. We've been taking all these samples all around the country. That has allowed us to now, a lot of the future's built is going to be built around models. So ultimately, we're not going to be able to scale carbon accounting for growers in a way that benefits all growers if every single farm needs to spend like $10,000+ on soil sampling and lab testing, and it's just not going to scale. And the supply chain is not wanting to go and give that money to growers to help them. So we have to find ways to use models. And that's what the Clean Energy Regulator's asking us to show them, or both to get the data in place to be able to underpin these models, but also to be able to create the confidence that they can trust these models, they can credit people based on models. So this, after we've taken, this is the Fleurieu Peninsula, after we've taken a ton of samples across all of, I think we did about 20 farms down the hills in Fleurieu, and then this is FarmLab. FarmLab then, we have a model that is making a prediction every 10 by 10 metres across the whole of the Fleurieu, and that model's been localised by all sample results we have, and then there's a way that we can then sum that up by every cadastral boundary in the whole of the region. So we can now basically, again, the idea is that we will be able to start to spot the outliers. So start to see the people that are higher than farms around them and then dig into if that's something that they've done previously. So I would hope here, well, Richard's vineyard would start to, probably somewhere around there, would start to kind of pop out something that's higher than normal. But what we're doing here, this is a place that we want to get to for grape growers who are climate, this is where I'd love to get to for climate active certified growers. So where we want to get to is we want to get to a point where, let's say we could pick a vineyard in McLaren Vale or Langhorne Creek. Let's say at the moment its baseline is 44 tonnes of carbon in the top 30 centimetres of its soil. What we do in how we use models, we then work with those farmers to understand what practice changes they want to adopt. So let's just pretend this grower is going to be improving the diversity of their mid-row species, and they actually think, like I'm going to invest in my mid-rows, I'm going to grow, let's say I would aim to grow 10% more biomass on average per year going forwards than what I did, just by, retaining it, growing a better crop, growing a better crop. That basically goes into a model, and then that model basically forward estimates the change that's going to happen because of that small increase in pasture biomass. And again, this particular farm's gone from 44 to 48 tonnes over 25 years. It sounds minuscule, but that's actually a really significant, that's literally nearly half the emissions of a vineyard has come through just them making the change in that soil. And when we look at things like that we can see from space, like pasture biomass, it gives us a route where we can actually show the Clean Energy Regulator, this vineyard used to look like this over the last 10 years, they've made the change in 2025, going forwards, it looks, we can see from space that actually it's giving us confidence that they actually are, on average, producing more pasture biomass than they used to. So, and again, we have to get to this point where this is just accounting, where people can there's a confidence enough in their results just because of what we're seeing from space. So that's where we want it to go. This is another thing I'd mentioned this in the main room. This is the best program that we see so far in Australia for canola growers, sadly not yet in South Australia, but this is dead simple. Like Cargill, the reason that this exists, a bit like stuff going into Sweden, this is stuff going into the EU. So this is basically Cargill supply some of our canola to the European biofuel market, and let's say that gets processed by BP in the EU, and BP wants to have a renewable, it both wants to have a renewable biodiesel product and it wants to have a biodiesel product that it can have confidence it's got the emissions around. So what they've done is they've probably paid Cargill a bit more money for every tonne of this renewable canola that comes into the EU, and then Cargill is passing $25 per hectare back to growers that can prove out that they've made certain management practice changes. It's only a 1-year commitment to start with, so yeah, it just kind of works. But they're actually giving money back to growers to implement new practices and moving the system forwards, which we really like. This is the tree, again, all similar to what Julian was showing, like the tree carbon numbers that we pulled out from those same specific vineyards. And like, yeah, you'll see McLaren Vale is typically 12 to 13 tonnes of CO2 that you'll sequester per hectare of environmental plantings. It would be great if those environmental plantings, you know, like are really taking on some of your work there, Mary, about, you know, yeah, shrubs as well as trees, you know, like multiple, like it would be good if environmental plantings were more and more diverse, and I think that's where it's all going. This is what we can do now at FarmLab. We have a layer that makes visible. This is a bit of Kangaroo Island. This is what's it called? Kingston's just here. Kangaroo Island's a fascinating place that it's got really big extremities across the island of what carbon credits you get for environmental plantings of trees. So all these areas you can see in blue, you're getting more than 10 tonnes per hectare per year. 10 tonnes, if that was, let's say, $50 a tonne, so like that 500 tonnes per hectare per year is actually very similar to what livestock producers in certain parts of the country actually earn off their pastures. So suddenly, you're kind of getting to a point where putting things into some shelter belts is making complete similar commercial sense as having it there for pasture, and you're obviously getting all these production benefits from starting to put more shelter belts in. So some really interesting stuff coming out. The Clean Energy Regulator has made environmental plantings super simple, so no auditing. And again, you heard it earlier, the auditing, when you actually need to get, you experienced it with Climate Active, as soon as you need to get a consultant or an auditor in, Treasury have got it in there. Plans every audit, I think they've budgeted at 25 grand, and they've got 3 of them coming up. It's just kind of, just makes a lot of this not worthwhile, which is what we really like about trees. So basically, if you plant anywhere between 0.1 hectare to 200 hectares under the environmental plantings method, there's no auditing. They just check it from space. You have to prove out with pictures you've actually planted what you said you're going to plant. You have to put a planting plan in. They then just monitor it from space. As long as the thing doesn't burn down, it achieves 20% canopy cover in that time, you'll just get credited, which is and that should absolutely go towards people who are Climate Active certified. Yeah, again, similar learnings to what, this is not a brilliant chart because this is 5 years of sequestration via soils, but basically echoing what you said, Julian, about we've seen in all our numbers is if you've got a vineyard footprint where 5% of it could be planted into environmental plantings, that will make a massive dent in you being carbon neutral. And if you can ally that with things you can do with your soils, like at least most vineyard operations would definitely be carbon neutral. Just some numbers I just wanted, and this is the second part of what I want to talk about, which is about diversification. You'll see this is just some trend stuff that I got off ABARES about what's happening in the country. So basically, this is climate change starting to bite agriculture. So a lot, apart from people who are lucky enough to be up or not, this northern part of WA, a lot of the rest of Australia, farming has become less and less profitable over the last 20 years. Sorry, I can go back. And that's getting, I think, from what I understand, that those red areas are just expanding and expanding, certainly over the last few years, certainly out towards us. When they look at their longer term trends as to what's going to happen to agriculture based on various climate scenarios, again, a lot of systems are looking like they're going to be under a lot of financial pressure going forwards. So a lot of things are going to get less profitable. So, yeah, so that's how things are looking. Sorry, I don't know if probably missed a chart there. Oh no, not. So we were thinking about that as grape growers, and we were like, okay, a bit like you're using fat lambs. We were like, we're only using a third of our vineyard to make money. Got dropped by Treasury this year, so we're like, we have to do something different. So we planted malting barley down every second row. So that actually, we got a little trial plot harvester in. It actually did okay. Lots of things we've tried haven't gone very well. This was actually about 2 tonnes a hectare. And there's an awesome maltster in Adelaide Hills called Malt Donkey, amazing high premium malting facility. So they've been malting our barley. Our block used to be a barley block for Coopers before it became a vineyard. So it's got some heritage, and they're all about trying to find produced beers that have a place. So beer from the Barossa, I think the Kaisler or something I think is doing it in the Barossa as well, are a partner of theirs. So really interesting. Again, the barley's worth more than our grapes at the moment. And bottles of beer in Europe are 750ml bottles of beer are selling for $20 a bottle. So, and people are having them in restaurants and drinking them like wine. So we're definitely going down that route. Sadly, like lots of other people, we had no other option. Tried to find out what else to do with them, but did end up piling them up and burning them. So we've been removing blocks of grapes. This is just my climate view of what's going to happen to McLaren Vale over the coming decades. Obviously, we're already made quite a significant drop of about 50 mils from 600 mils to 550 mils. But you look at what's projected to happen towards the end of the century, we actually get into a proper dry region by. Luckily, we have irrigation, we'll have a water system and stuff, so that we've got some resilience built in there. But it's going to be a different place. And again, this is what started us off looking at doing something completely different. So we planted agave. So these are tequilana plants. So these are the plants that make tequila in Jalisco, in Mexico. I'm going there next month, hoping that one day ours are going to look something like this. But again, we don't want to create a blue desert. The Mexicans have done exactly the same as we've done. They've carpeted Jalisco. They call it the blue desert. They've carpeted Jalisco with one Blue Weber tequilana type plant, causing loads of issues. So now they're reversing out of that system, just like we are in viticulture. We had a really great rancher from Mexico come over to visit us called Alejandro Carrillo, who's really at the forefront of grazing amongst agave, and that's what we want to do. So we've got barley down each row this year, but we want to get to a point where we're integrating livestock and agave. Alejandro said donkeys are the best things they have. So if anybody's into donkeys, donkeys and agave are meant to be amazing companions. But they've tried, it's worked well with cattle, it's worked well with cattle, horses. Livestock hate them, they're really prickly. They don't burn as well, so they're a fire break. So in California now, around the wine regions, they're starting to put tequila plantations in as fire breaks. So we might well start seeing that in South Australia. But when you silage the leaves, they are actually reasonable drought feed. So they're used as emergency feed in Mexico. So we could find some secondary usages for them, some there. And obviously we've got a lot of like fermentation facilities around here. So yeah, we're going to be distilling for spirit, but the agave, the sugars in agave can be obviously turned into ethanol. There are pathways towards it being used for fuels and for it to be used as sources of actually like the sugar going into biofermenters to create precursors of plastics and all these other things. So yeah, like a fascinating crop. We're mostly growing soursopes. I think are soursopes forbs, mate? I'm hoping they're are they forbs? Guess flowering. Growing a lot of soursopes at the moment down our block, embracing the messiness. But yeah, this is the other stuff we're doing. We have to automate. So there's work in Queensland to do with automating harvesting. We've just been starting to test out whether we can get to a point where we can plant agave in really marginal land, maybe up around here in places that are moving from cropping into something else. And yeah, maybe having something like an agave bot that just goes down to every plant and just waters every plant. Like the agave just needs some help in their first year. But yeah, we hand watered them to start with. We got frosted. So again, don't plant the varieties we planted, Tekalana, hidden down in there somewhere, because they're not very frost tolerant. We had 2 frosts, first frosts in Wollonga since we've been there in 10 years within 2 weeks. It was a shocker. They survived mainly, but we just gave them sea salt and water and they kicked off. So yeah, we want to be able to have this automatically going down. And that was a slasher, but it has a little irrigation unit as well. So yeah, we just needed to kind of stop every plant, but almost cracked in Queensland now doing that. Yeah, and just like these gigantic, this is what needs to happen, automation needs to happen. So, can we chop the leaves off by having some kind of different head inside a big harvester that's a bit more like what you trim, you trim trees with. Yeah. Lots of interesting opportunities with bringing in, potentially also bringing in like agrivoltaics into that system as well. Yeah, if it all goes completely tits up, we just drink it. So yeah, so we're going to learn about that. And actually with the Wait campus, I think the first planting is just going in the Barossa at the moment, actually, with somebody who works with you, Nicki. Yeah, with Justin. So yeah, the Wait campus is learning. The distilling school is actually doing the first trial runs of agave spirit production. So yeah, so we'll see. That's me.